but drove the church fathers absolutely crazy. And personally, I like to hope that this troublemaker Marcus delighted in pissing them off. Oh, hello my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance, it's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is Entheogenic Gnosticism. The term Gnostic is problematic, as it is a modern academic construct that no one in the ancient world, who we today might call Gnostic, ever would have used for themselves. However, since the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, scholars have started moving away from that term. The discovery of the texts forced academics to realize that many of the groups that they were sort of herding under the umbrella term Gnostic were actually all quite different from each other. Before the discovery, the only writings we had about these different groups came from their attackers, the Church Fathers, who were not exactly pleased with them and tended to write about them in the most negative light possible. Perhaps the two most off-cited examples that demonstrate this point can be found in the differences between the Ebionites and the Marcionites. Both are considered Gnostic by some scholars, and yet their beliefs, like on paper, were diametrically opposed to each other. As just one of many examples, while the Ebionites rejected the Apostle Paul as a heretic, the Marcionites saw him as a champion of the Christian faith. Now, this is not to say that there were not some overlaps of belief between these different sects. I mean, there certainly were. It's when we get into the nuance that we see the variety of beliefs. Nonetheless, in this video, I will be using the term Gnostic just for ease and flow and because it is common parlance. The truth is, evidence is very scanty for entheogenic Gnosticism. As such, we will have to make educated inferences from time to time. In this video, we will be looking at 3 heretics for which we have a fair amount of evidence for, and see what truth, if any, may lie in the claim of entheogenic Gnosticism. But first, if you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the Psychedelic Historian YouTube channel, and hit that little bell icon so that you're notified every time I post a new video. Also, it'd be great to link up on Instagram. Find me at Psychedelic Historian. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. Beginning with the most famous heretic of Christian lore, Simon Magus, the so-called father of heresies. Simon Magus came from Samaria on the western bank of northern Israel. The thing is, we don't know if an actual Simon from Samaria ever existed at all. He might have been totally made up by the Church Fathers as a literary device. Or he may have been based on a real person, or might have been a composite of several people. We just don't know. Nonetheless, real or imagined, Simon Magus gives us insight into what writers thought about magicians and how they operated at the time. Simon was said to be a wonder worker and a deceiver of simple souls, meaning church fathers believed he was using magic tricks to convince people that he had divine powers. He was even rumored to have had his own gospel, which, sadly, hasn't come down to us. Should it even have existed at all? Although certain church fathers like Hippolytus do seem to quote from this book in his own writing, so I mean maybe it was a gospel that did exist in the ancient world. It also seems like Simon might have had knowledge of psychoactive plants, somewhat depending on how we interpret Epiphanius's Contra Haeresi, or Against Heresies. Therein, Epiphanius mentions that Simon, pretending that he was mixing hellebore with honey, added a poison for those whom he hunted into his mischievous illusion. Hellebore was a well-known medical plant in the ancient world, and here Epiphanius indicates that Simon, instead of giving his followers an actual medicine, had instead given them a poison. Here I need to point out that in Latin, poison can mean several things. It can mean poison the way we think about poison today, like something if you drink it is going to harm you or kill you. Poison could also be used to mean an actual medicine that heals you, and poison could have been used the way we today would use the word entheogen. However, it's also possible that Epiphanius meant it all as a metaphor, poison simply meaning a heresy or a false belief in this context. It is also possible that both are true. Epiphanius used a drug metaphor because Simon was actually drugging his congregants. In fact, Church Father Irenaeus tells us rather explicitly that Simon used love potions among his followers. Love potions, called pocula amatoria in the Latin, are what we today would call recreational drugs. A love potion typically involved both symbolic and psychoactive ingredients. The most well-attested plant found in love potions at the time was the highly psychoactive mandrake, which causes both visions and erotic stimulation. Although I should say opium was also pretty popular among the people. For those interested, I have a whole video on mandrake, a whole video on opium, and a whole video on magic potions, which I'll link below. At this time, we cannot say for certain what is the historical reality, although Irenaeus seems pretty convinced that some kind of substance use was taking place among Simon and his followers. But ultimately, too much time has passed for us ever to have any certainty about the matter. But Simon wasn't our only heretic for whom church fathers claim to have knowledge of psychoactive plants. Carpocrates was also said to have used drug potions to achieve magical feats. And once again, it is Irenaeus who is most bothered by this, writing, "Carpocratians practice also magical arts and incantations, philters also and love potions." Perhaps Carpocrates used these kinds of potions for dream divination and other forms of prophecy. It certainly wouldn't have been unheard of in the ancient world, at least according to Pliny the Elder's Natural History, where he lists a battery of plants, some known, some unknown, that people used in his day for just those purposes. One of Carpocrates' students, a certain Marcelina, came from Alexandria, which was already a hotbed of magical activity. After studying with Carpocrates, Marcelina took this mission to Rome, where she most likely instructed others in Carpocrates' use of these love potions and plant medicines. In those days, women typically oversaw the house churches, and Marcelina ended up gaining a large following. Whether or not she formed her congregation by dosing her followers, well, that remains unclear. We have no idea. But it is certainly possible that Marcelina used the plant magic she had learned from Carpocrates while she was in Rome. Which brings us to our last figure we will explore, Magus the Magician. Magus had been a member of the Valentinian sect, but then went on to form his own group after he had a vision of the infinitely exalted tetrad, which descended upon him from the invisible and indescribable places in the form of a woman, and expounded to him alone its own nature and the origin of all things, which it had never before revealed to anyone. Such a vision would not have been uncommon for a pupil studying under Valentinus. In fact, all Valentinians hoped to achieve this kind of revelation. The evidence we have for Marcus's plant-based magic is way better than what we have for Simon Magus or Carpocrates. Indeed, the very women he drugged while performing his rites ended up informing on him. Marcus's main mystery rite involved awakening Charis in both women and men by giving them a mixed wine to drink. Charis, the goddess of grace, would spill her blood, her essence, into that cup, making such visions accessible to anyone who partook. All that Charis needed now was her cosmic Christ. And Marcus, as one can imagine, eagerly filled that role. He would stir his potion before his disciple and ask her to drink it, saying, "May the Charis who is before all things and who transcends all knowledge and speech fill your inner person and multiply in you her own knowledge, by sowing the grain of mustard seed in you as in good soil. Receive first from me and by me the gift of Charis. Adorn yourself as a bride who is expecting her bridegroom, that you may be what I am and I what you are. Establish the germ of light in your nuptial chamber. Receive from me a spouse and become receptive of him, while you are received by him. Behold, Charis has descended upon you."
This is your brain on drugs.
In passionate frenzy, the two would embrace each other. This may be perhaps the clearest example of a person from the ancient world mingling Eastern pagan sex rites, Aeon angelology, for lack of a better term, and Christianity. Indeed, the rite strikes me as another magical operation that I'd come across in the Demotic magical papyrus. Only with that rite, it is the blood of the Egyptian god Osiris that is poured into the cup, not that of Charis. The thing we have to remember is that using substances in and of themselves in the ancient world was not illegal. Lawmakers tended to focus on the act, not the substance. So someone like Marcus wouldn't necessarily get in trouble for using drugged concoctions and magical potions. He would have been condemned for the ways he used them. And in this case, he seems to have used them to bring the spirit of Charis into another person, which wouldn't have offended Roman authorities, but drove the church fathers absolutely crazy. And personally, I like to hope that this troublemaker Marcus delighted in pissing them off. As I said earlier, like most claims in the ancient world, evidence for entheogenic Gnosticism is scanty at best. Although I do believe that enough evidence has survived the passage of time to indicate that some people who ran Gnostic sects from time to time seem to have used different kinds of plant medicines in their understanding of the mythopoetics of their faiths. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and I'd love to thank you for stopping by. Please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the page, of course, if you found value in this content, and let's meet up on Instagram. And until that day, I'm Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.